He had saved for 11 months for this single seat. What he didn't know was that in less than an hour, that seat and everyone around it.
5 minutes after the wealthy man took his seat, the alarms began, and no amount of money in the world could buy his way out of what was coming.
Everyone was evicted from that flight, but only one man would be evicted from more than just his seat. By the time the truth came out, his entire...
If you have ever watched someone push past you in life simply because they had more money, more power, or more confidence than you, stay with this story until the very end, because what happens to the man who steals a single father's seat will leave you speechless. And if stories like this move you, do us a favor, hit that like button right now and subscribe to the channel, because we tell these stories every single week, and you will not want to miss what comes next. James Carter had never asked anyone for anything in his life. He was the kind of man who worked 2 jobs without complaint, who fixed his own car in the driveway at midnight because he couldn't afford a mechanic, who packed his daughter's lunch every morning with a note tucked inside even on the days he had nothing left in him to give. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier, and since then, it had been just James and his 7-year-old daughter Lily against the world. He worked as a warehouse supervisor during the day and drove for a delivery service most nights, and every dollar he earned beyond rent and groceries went into a small envelope hidden in the back of his closet labeled, in his own uneven handwriting, Lily's Dream Trip. For 11 months, James had scraped together every spare cent toward one single goal, taking Lily to visit her grandmother in another state for the first time since her mother's passing, and doing it right. Not a red-eye economy flight with 3 connections and a screaming baby 3 rows back, but something special. Something that would make his daughter feel, just once, like the world had rolled out something soft and beautiful just for her. He had found a promotional VIP upgrade deal through the airline, 1 seat, deeply discounted but still nearly a month's salary, and he had bought it without telling Lily, wanting to surprise her at the gate. The morning of the flight, James woke Lily up an hour earlier than necessary just so they could take their time getting ready. He ironed his one good shirt, the same navy blue button-up he wore to his wife's funeral and to every job interview since, and he braided 2 small yellow ribbons into Lily's hair because she loved yellow more than any other color in the world. When he told her, right there in the kitchen with her cereal going soggy in the bowl, that they were flying VIP class, she had shrieked with delight and hugged him so tightly around the neck that he had to steady himself against the counter. It was, he would say later, one of the best moments of his life. They arrived at the airport 3 hours early because James did not trust anything about this day to go wrong. He held Lily's hand through security, let her pick out a small treat at the newsstand, and watched her practically vibrate with excitement as they approached the gate. When their boarding group was called, James knelt down, adjusted her small star-covered backpack, and told her that today she was going to feel like a princess. Lily beamed up at him with an expression he would remember for the rest of his life. Neither of them had any idea that within the hour, that same excitement would curdle into something entirely different. The gate agent scanned their boarding passes without incident, and James walked Lily down the jet bridge with his chest puffed out just slightly, the way a father does when he has finally, after years of struggle, managed to give his child something extraordinary. When they stepped into the cabin and found seat 2A, the wide leather recliner by the window that James had imagined Lily sinking into for weeks, his stomach dropped. A man was already sitting in it. The man was tall, silver-haired, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than James made in 2 months, with a gold watch glinting on his wrist as he scrolled through his phone without so much as glancing up. James checked his boarding pass twice, his hands trembling slightly, before he cleared his throat and explained, as politely as he possibly could, that this was his assigned seat. The man, whose name James would later learn was Richard Whitmore, finally looked up, and the look on his face was not confusion or apology. It was irritation, the kind reserved for someone who considers an interruption beneath them. Richard said, without raising his voice but with a coldness that cut deeper than shouting ever could, that there had clearly been some mistake, that he always flew in this exact seat, that his assistant had booked it weeks ago, and that James should simply speak with the flight attendant to sort out whatever error had occurred on the airline's end. James, still holding Lily's hand, still trying to keep his voice calm so as not to frighten her, flagged down the flight attendant, a woman named Maria who arrived with a tablet and an expression that told James everything he needed to know before she even opened her mouth. There had been a system overbooking error, Maria explained apologetically, glancing between the two boarding passes on her screen. Both passengers had been ticketed for the same seat due to a technical glitch during a system migration the airline had rolled out that week. Someone would need to be reseated, and because Richard Whitmore was a Platinum Elite member with the airline, a designation that came with its own quiet hierarchy of privilege, the airline's policy defaulted to accommodating him first. James felt something in his chest tighten as Maria, clearly uncomfortable with her own words, informed him that he and Lily would be moved to available seats in the economy cabin instead, with a partial refund to be processed after the flight. James wanted to argue. He wanted to explain that he had saved for 11 months, that this seat represented more to him than a temporary upgrade, that it was supposed to be the one perfect thing he gave his daughter after years of scraping by. But Lily was standing right there, watching him, and James had promised himself a long time ago that he would never let his daughter see him beg or grovel for anything, not from anyone. So instead, he took a breath, thanked Maria for her help, and told Richard Whitmore, with a steadiness that cost him everything he had left, that he hoped he enjoyed the seat. Lily's face fell as her father led her down the aisle toward the back of the plane. She didn't say anything, but James could feel her small hand tighten in his, and when he glanced down at her, he saw her blinking hard, trying not to cry the way children do when they don't yet have the words for disappointment, but feel its full weight anyway. James settled her into a cramped economy seat near the back, tucked her blanket around her shoulders, and told her, in the gentlest voice he could manage, that sometimes plans change, but that the important thing was that they were flying together, and that was the only part of the trip that really mattered. Lily nodded, but James could see she didn't quite believe him yet. For the first 20 minutes of the flight, James sat quietly, staring out the small window, replaying the encounter over and over in his mind, feeling the particular shame that comes from being made to feel small in front of your own child. He thought about the envelope in his closet, about the double shifts, about the nights he'd fallen asleep at the wheel of his delivery van from exhaustion, all funneled into a seat that had been taken from him in less time than it took to explain it. He told himself it didn't matter, that they were still going to see Lily's grandmother, that the important thing was arriving safely. He almost believed it. Then, exactly 5 minutes after the seatbelt sign had turned off and passengers had begun settling in, the cabin lights flickered and a sharp, urgent tone rang out over the intercom. The captain's voice came on, tense and clipped, informing passengers that a mechanical warning light had triggered in the cockpit related to cabin pressurization, and that as a precaution, the flight would be returning immediately to the gate for a full inspection. Flight attendants moved briskly through the aisles, their calm expressions doing little to mask the urgency in their movements, instructing everyone to remain seated with seatbelts fastened. James pulled Lily close, his heart pounding, and murmured reassurances into her hair even as his own hands trembled slightly. The plane taxied back toward the gate with unusual speed, and the moment it came to a stop, the intercom crackled again. This was not a minor delay. Ground crews had detected a fault requiring the aircraft to be taken out of service entirely, and every single passenger would need to deplane immediately and be reassigned to a different aircraft. Everyone, without exception, VIP class and economy alike, would need to gather their belongings and evacuate through the jet bridge in an orderly fashion. James felt an odd, unexpected flicker of vindication in that moment, immediately followed by a flush of guilt for feeling anything but relief that they were safe. As passengers filed off the aircraft, weary and murmuring amongst themselves, James caught sight of Richard Whitmore near the front of the line. His earlier composure cracked at the edges, his phone pressed to his ear as he barked at someone about missed meetings and unacceptable delays. What happened next, James would later say, was something he never could have predicted, and something he still found himself thinking about months afterward. As the ground crew worked to process the evacuated passengers, An airline security representative approached the gate area with a tablet, quietly requesting to speak with Richard Whitmore. It turned out that the same system glitch that had bumped James from his seat had also flagged something else entirely: Richard Whitmore's Platinum Elite status. The very status that had granted him priority over James in the first place had been fraudulently duplicated using stolen loyalty credentials belonging to an entirely different passenger, a decorated Air Force veteran who had reported unauthorized activity on his account earlier that same week. Richard Whitmore had for years been exploiting a loophole through a contact inside the airline's rewards program, purchasing falsified elite status upgrades on the black market to secure premium seating without ever actually earning the loyalty miles required. The very same system malfunction that had bumped James's legitimate ticket had cross-referenced account activity and flagged the fraudulent duplication, triggering an internal security review that airline investigators had, by pure coincidence, been prepared to act on that very day. Security escorted Richard Whitmore to a private office off the main terminal for questioning, his protests growing quieter with every step, the gold watch on his wrist suddenly looking less like a symbol of success and more like evidence in an unfolding investigation. Maria, the flight attendant, found James and Lily standing near a row of seats in the terminal, both of them still slightly shaken from the evacuation. She knelt down to Lily's level first, telling her gently that she was very brave, and then turned to James with an expression of genuine remorse. She explained what had happened, apologized sincerely for how he had been treated earlier, and informed him that not only would he receive a full refund for the original very important person seat, but the airline would be placing him and Lily in first class on the next available flight, free of charge, along with a formal letter of apology and additional travel credit for the inconvenience. James, who had spent the last hour trying to hold himself together for his daughter's sake, felt something in his chest finally loosen. It wasn't about the free upgrade, not really. It was the simple, quiet relief of being seen, of having someone acknowledge that what happened to him had been wrong, that his 11 months of saving and his daughter's disappointed little face had mattered to someone other than himself. 2 hours later, James and Lily boarded a different aircraft, and this time when they reached their seats, it was seat 2A and 2 billions, side by side, exactly as James had originally planned. Lily's face lit up all over again as she sank into the wide leather seat, running her small hands over the armrests in wonder, and James felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes that he quickly blinked away, not wanting Lily to see him cry, though for entirely different reasons than before. As the plane climbed into the sky, Lily reached over and took her father's hand, resting her head against his arm, and told him that this was the best day of her life. James looked down at her, at the 2 yellow ribbons in her hair that he had tied that morning with hands still calloused from years of hard work, and he understood something he would carry with him for a long time afterward. Dignity was never about the seat someone sat in. It was about how a person carried themselves when that seat was taken from them, and it was about what happened when the truth, eventually and inevitably, found its way to the surface. Later, James would learn that Richard Whitmore faced serious legal consequences for the fraudulent loyalty scheme, a scandal that made headlines and ended his business partnerships almost overnight. But James rarely thought about that part of the story. What stayed with him instead was the image of his daughter's face when the seat finally became hers, fair and square, earned through nothing more than an ordinary man's extraordinary patience. Somewhere over the clouds that afternoon, James Carter closed his eyes, held his daughter's hand a little tighter, and let himself believe, just for a moment, that the world did eventually balance itself out for people who simply kept showing up with quiet grace, even when no one else was watching.